Of all the shots in tennis, the one-handed backhand is arguably the most elegant and aesthetically pleasing. The best players in the history of the sport have used the shot to perfection and won Grand Slams. Others have gone on to become top players. The one-handed backhand might be a dying art at the moment because of how fast the modern tennis is evolving, but in the meantime, a certain Italian artist is rewriting the narrative while also making sure that we get our money's worth of entertainment. Lorenzo Musetti is now a bona fide top 10 player, and his results on the clay this season have been mind-boggling. The semifinals are better in each of the Masters 1000s he's played. We're going to do a complete breakdown of now one of the most exciting players on the tour, and after that, get into exactly what are his chances for the French Open title. Starting with the serve. It's an obvious weakness for Musetti, and although he's improved the shot over the years, it's still average compared to other parts of his game. Over the years, Musetti has struggled to find consistency behind the delivery. Here's the thing, Musetti has the power to sometimes hit above 130 miles per hour. Plus, he also has a nice kick or two, which is a pretty good offering to start the point on clay. This invariably means that there are days when you'll see Musetti serve really well, but more often than not, he struggles to get many free points off the serve because of how inconsistent the delivery is. Musetti has the fewest aces in the top 25 and a below-average percentage of service points won in the last 52 weeks. Still, he manages to get more from his serve even when facing some of the best servers. This is because of how good other areas of his game are. For example, against Zverev in Rome, Musetti won 70% of points on his first serve compared to Zverev at 59%. Safe to say there's still a lot of room for improvement on his serve, but what about his forehand? Just like the serve, the forehand continues to get better, and the best part is that Musetti still has a lot of runway to make the shot better than what it is at the moment. From a technique standpoint, Musetti's forehand requires a long preparation. The outside setup and the takeback that follows isn't exactly the most efficient as well, and there's a high backswing, visible wrist flexion that kind of reminds me of Francis Tiafoe in that aspect. Musetti's forehand creates a swing that, in theory, should give him more time to accelerate. However, there were arguments that there's a mental component to why Musetti isn't able to maintain high levels of consistent aggression off the forehand, but more on that later. On top of that, the somewhat longer stroke production also doesn't allow him to handle pace either. This means that Musetti is better off on surfaces that give him enough time to set up his shot, like in Monte Carlo where the surface is so slow. And it's no coincidence that Musetti has more wins at Monte Carlo than any other ATP-level event in his career. Now, pointing out these problems doesn't exactly mean that we're not going to see Musetti hit heavy and aggressive forehands, and as a matter of fact, I thought his forehand was a real weapon against Berrettini in round 3 of Monte Carlo. There was a lot of pace and liveliness on it, and Musetti also showed great rally tolerance. Also, when opponents target his backhand more, Musetti is comfortable running around it to hit a massive forehand to draw out the error from the opponent. Let's also remember that several other key factors like movement, tactics, court position, and opposition quality also influence forehand effectiveness. And at this point, I'd like to disagree a bit with what Zverev said about Musetti depending on opponents' errors, because I thought Musetti was quite aggressive in the quarterfinal in Rome. The inside-out forehand has also caught fire lately, and the confidence with which he hits the shot is more palpable than ever. In fact, it's normal to see him dominating so many points with his forehand alone. So we've pointed to the serve and the forehand as areas of improvement for Musetti if he wants to hold down a top 10 spot for a long time, but what about the things that he actually does well? Musetti takes pride in his signature shot, the one-handed backhand. According to him, it gives a more vintage feel. However, with the increasing need to produce backhands with a lot of topspin, Musetti is well aware of the fact that one-handers are at a bit of a disadvantage. Still, he's made his backhand so versatile and dangerous that it's a problem for many players on tour. He can hit hard and flat, with topspin, or go for the slice. Musetti is now the top-ranked one-hander in the game, and he deserves a ton of respect for that. The backhand is fun to watch, and unlike many of the other one-handers, the shot doesn't seem to hold him back all that much, at least in my opinion. This is largely due to his ability to produce wicked slices that stay really low off the backhand side. Musetti uses the slice defense to extend points, which works to perfection against players who don't have the offensive arsenal to deal with short slices. Let me take you back to the Wimbledon quarterfinal match against Fritz last year. Musetti sliced and diced and sliced so much that he either put Fritz in the most awkward positions on the court, or forced him to hit shots from a low contact point. And when Fritz was forced to hit shots off balance, Musetti seized the opportunity to hit through the backhand. Here's an example. Oh, and here's another one where Musetti forced Fritz to raise the ball up before finishing him off with a winner, essentially using the slice as a setup. Way too many times we saw Fritz stranded in no man's land simply because Musetti used the slice to perfection. And at other times, we saw Fritz missing wildly because the slice just troubled him overall. It was brutal. The slice has certainly been a huge weapon for Musetti on grass, but let's talk about an area of his game where we might get some conflicting opinions. Musetti typically takes a very deep return position from the back of the court. We're talking like 3, 4, sometimes even 5 meters behind the baseline. As with any deep return position, the immediate aim is to give yourself more time to react and also take a full cut at the ball. Musetti does this pretty well and is able to add a lot of height and spin to his shots, pushing opponents back and forcing them to play a ton of extra rally balls. This works pretty well for those who don't have enough in their offense, but against players like Novak or Alcaraz, such a deep return position isn't always effective because it just opens up a lot of attackable space in the forecourt. What we see here is someone like Alcaraz or Novak simply just going for the drop shot as much as they want. Or opponents can take advantage of the open space and just close in on the net. The good thing is that not many people can blast Musetti off the court at free will or take advantage of his deep return position, so in many cases, you'll see Musetti's return getting dividends with opponent mistakes or errors because of his unpredictable rally patterns and baseline variability. One thing I really enjoy about watching Musetti is how he disrupts his opponent's rhythm with really lively balls. It's like no two shots are the same from him, and we don't really see him dragging opponents into those neutral, boring cross-court rallies. He doesn't have those metronomic baseline patterns that we see in players like Zverev or Medvedev, both players who he beat in straight sets on his way to the Italian Open semis. In fact, for many, Musetti's strengths and shortcomings are reminiscent of Richard Gasquet, and some have even gone as far as calling him a 2.0 version of the Frenchman. The block return has also been useful for Musetti a number of times. He uses it to absorb the pace from a huge serve and at the same time return the ball without much pace of its own. This gives him more time to recover back to the center of the court while preventing the server from attacking him right away. It's especially effective on grass when the bounce is low. Oh, and when you're then forced to come forward behind the serve, Musetti then hits you with a passing shot. Up next, we're going to talk about Musetti's variety, which is frustrating for many players to play against. In addition to being an elite defender off both wings, Musetti manages to steal plenty of points from defensive positions with his off-pace variety and touch. Being a talented ball striker himself and one of the smartest players on tour, Musetti uses his court speed and end-range craft to neutralize opponents with huge weapons. He was able to neutralize the big-serving Pechi Pericard twice on grass last year, at Wimbledon and in Stuttgart. He's beaten Ben Shelton and Fritz a number of times, beaten Zverev 3 times, pushed Djokovic a number of times, and recently got the monkey off his back with a first win over Tsitsipas in 6 attempts. To sum it all up, when you're facing Musetti, have it in the back of your mind that you're going to cover every blade of grass because he's just going to keep mixing up the spins, height, and pace on the rally balls. Also, another reason that Musetti is absolutely one of my favorite players to watch on tour is that he just reminds me how beautiful the game can be. And no, I'm not just talking about his high-end flair or those incredible passing shots on the run. There's more. The touch, the creativity in terms of point construction, the silky smooth drop shots, drop volleys, the acute angles, and how he's so adept at making use of the entire court and its dimensions are some of the things that draw fans to Musetti's game. And then we have the speed and court coverage, which are fantastic to say the least. Musetti is the type of guy that will move forward if you give him the chance. On natural surfaces like clay where the rallies are longer and you need to grind out points, Musetti uses his remarkable athleticism to cover the entire court. So how do you beat Musetti? Take time away from him. This is easier to do on hard courts though. Only a few players like Alcaraz have the ability to rush Musetti on the slow surfaces, which is why the losses in Monte Carlo and Rome weren't exactly surprising. Next, to beat Musetti, you have to be consistent. Musetti always tries to disrupt your rhythm. It's really a trademark quality for him. However, being patient from the baseline helps opponents avoid getting frustrated. And last but not least, you'd have to be immune to Musetti's variety. However, this is only easy if you're a complete player. What do I mean by this? Musetti's wicked slice bothers many players, but those who can respond to the slice with an even better slice, or simply generate a lot of pace regardless, will often be the ones who find more success against Musetti. If you've been following Musetti's career closely to this point, you've probably noticed a pattern of really great results on clay and grass, and then something kind of lacking on the hard courts. Take a look at the career tour level split. Musetti has actually lost more hard court matches than he's won in his career, a 47.7% win percentage on hard courts compared to over 60% on clay and grass. Who else comes to mind with a similar pattern to Musetti? Great results on clay and grass and not so much on hard courts? Surprisingly, it's Matteo Berrettini, who I'm also going to do a deep dive on at some point in the future. All of Berrettini's 10 ATP titles so far have either come on clay or grass, none on hard courts. But back to Musetti. We already touched on some of the things that make Musetti's game a bit surface sensitive. The lack of huge weapons like the serve and the forehand off the ground mean that Musetti doesn't always have enough firepower to hang in with the big hitters on the hard courts. This is especially pronounced on the faster ones, where he also can't protect his one-hander as much, and more often than not, his returns sit up, and opponents can also take advantage of that too. In a quick summary, hard courts reward big serving and powerful baseline play more than variety. In addition to those shortcomings, Musetti's sometimes passive brand of tennis also doesn't get rewarded as much on hard courts because, like we said, the elite ball strikers are just going to hit through his defense and variety regardless. We're already seeing Musetti take matters into his own hands and dictate play more often to buck the trend. Also, since clay rewards defenders and grass rewards great slices and movement, Musetti is able to get more from his game on those natural surfaces. But is it going to be enough? Musetti admits that clay is his favorite surface, but in order for him to have real staying power in the top 10, he's definitely going to have to dial it up a notch on the hard courts. The fact of the matter is that most of the tour is played on the surface, and even if he does continue to put in great results on grass and clay, in order for him to really lock in his place in the top 10, he's going to have to improve on the hard surface. Musetti is only 3-11 against top 10 players on hard courts, and none of those 3 wins came in straight sets. However, the Italian did reach the final on the hard courts in Chengdu, where he lost to Shang last year. However, he didn't face a single top 40 opponent along the way, so honestly, we can't make too much out of that. Musetti is a top 10 player on other surfaces, but on hard courts, his current ELO rating leaves him on the fringes of the top 30. This is why you often get results that are not surprising, but are still upsets by ranking nonetheless. A case in point would be like the loss to Arthur Fils at Indian Wells and Shelton at the Australian Open earlier this year. Musetti won his first 2 ATP finals, but has since lost the last 4. With his last ATP title coming all the way back in 2022, Musetti would be eager to back up his newfound confidence with some silverware. But let's shift the focus to his mentality, shall we? If there's any part to Musetti that has come under a lot of scrutiny, it's his mental resilience. Musetti has nursed a lot of scar tissue from the painful defeats against the likes of Djokovic, Goffin, Tsitsipas, and Alcaraz. And in the past, losing close matches called into question his toughness. If there's anything, though, that we can all agree on, it's the fact that Musetti has made a lot of progress in that area, though. Looking back at his Monte Carlo run, where he became only the 3rd Italian man in the Open era to reach the final in the tournament, you'll notice that Musetti dug himself out of trouble so many times. Looking at the results, you'll maybe notice a pattern. Musetti loses the first set horribly, like 6-1, and then he's either down a break or facing break points in the second set, only to turn the match on its head and pull off a Houdini. Why's that, though? See, in each of those matches where Musetti found himself in trouble, he started to swing more freely and go for his shots, rather than going back to his default passive mode. This shows that Musetti can get rewarded a whole lot for his aggression, and this is something that many of us want to see. A player who's going for it off of both wings instead of just grinding it from the back of the court. In fact, Musetti didn't even drop a set in Rome or Madrid until his losses in the semifinals. Zooming in on other aspects of his mental toughness, Musetti still gets upset a lot when things are out of his control. Understandable though, who wouldn't be upset? The problem, however, is that those close misses, net cords, or winners from opponents sometimes make Musetti lose focus. You'll see him get so angry that it maybe starts to affect him a bit. My Italian isn't great, but some fans say that Musetti curses and swears like crazy when he gets pissed off. When it comes to endurance, there's still a lot of room for improvement. In the past, we've seen the wheels fall off for Musetti in the final stages of a 5-setter or in deciding sets. I can remember a number of times against Djokovic myself. Again, Musetti isn't the first name that comes to mind when it comes to stamina problems or durability, but then things could get better in that department. Now, that being said, to be a pro tennis player and have that level of fitness is truly one of the great athletic challenges in sport. Musetti is no exception to this, and let me tell you, I've learned firsthand the vast difference between the pros and an average guy like me. And we'll be dropping a lot of content over the next few weeks of my journey, and maybe you'll see a few legends of the game that you might recognize in the videos. Anyways, I'm super excited to share it with all of you, so stay tuned for sure. Taking a look into Musetti's box, his coaching has also come under scrutiny a lot in the past, and I'll tell you why. Musetti's rise to the top was quick. He was already the #1 ranked junior in 2019, a few months after he just turned 17 years old. He made his ATP debut in 2020, became the first player born in 2002 to win an ATP match that year, and broke into the top 100 the following year in 2021. Top 10 wins followed, and a young Musetti almost pulled off an unbelievable upset against Djokovic in the 4th round at Roland Garros that year after going up 2-0. After snagging 2 ATP titles and breaking into the top 25 in 2022, Musetti's trajectory seemed to stall a bit in 2023, and it almost seemed like he was taking a step back, especially considering that the younger players like Alcaraz and Rune were on the rise. Now this is what called for changes in the coaching department. Musetti said in an interview that he found it funny that people were asking him to change his coach because it never crossed his mind. Musetti has been working with Simone Tartarini since he was 9, and according to Musetti, Simone is like a second father to him. But question for you guys. How do you know when it's time to pull the plug on your childhood coach and maybe go with someone who has a bit more ATP experience and a proven track record? I'm eager to learn from you all in the comments. The first part of 2024 didn't go as planned for Musetti. He started the season having fallen out of the top 20, and he didn't win back-to-back matches until Miami. He then suffered first-round exits in Estoril, Barcelona, Madrid, and Rome, but returned to form on grass where he made his first Grand Slam semifinal at Wimbledon and went 12-3 on the surface. He then picked up a bronze medal at the Olympics to become the first Italian tennis player to win an Olympic medal in 100 years. Musetti also had a baby in the middle of a busy year that would have added more responsibility, but all in all, I think Musetti is in a good place at the moment. His early success might have raised expectations too early in the past, but after watching the Italian in the recent weeks, I'd say he's closer than ever to unlocking his full potential. Honestly, guys, I don't really see any ceiling on his game right now. As far as predictions go, I have Musetti as a top 5 or top 6 contender for the Roland Garros title, and definitely one of my favorite dark horses. Alcaraz and Sinner are the obvious favorites. Novak is Novak, Zverev is always going to be in the mix, Casper is a 2-time finalist, and Draper has been playing out of his skin. Beyond what happens in Paris, I also want to see Musetti hit 40 or 50 wins in 2025 and be more consistent from tournament to tournament outside of the clay. I'm also backing Musetti for some serious silverware between now and July, just as long as he stays healthy. Also, it's crazy to think that he's only 23 years old and we really haven't even seen the best of him yet. It leaves me wondering and just super excited just what that would look like. Guys, if you loved this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and don't miss a beat of the action here on Courtside Tennis. In addition to the Roland Garros coverage that we'll be bringing you over the next few weeks, we also spent some time filming with Babolat in France and at the International Tennis Hall of Fame. I'm telling you, this is content that we haven't done at all before on the channel, and it's going to be coming out in the next few weeks. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.